Recording. Okay, so we are live. It is October 1st. And I would go remiss if I didn't say that happy birthday to my son, whose birthday is today. And hopefully he will listen to this sometime and realize that I did embarrass him in public. We have a great day today. I happen to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin today, and it's a perfect day in paradise here. 72 degrees, clear skies, gorgeous. Tomorrow I'm attending an innovation cafe around advanced manufacturing, a new project that is going on with a great friend of ours. And I'm going to be saying a few words and spending the whole day with a bunch of superstars that are trying to bring latest technology to Wisconsin for advanced manufacturing, robotics, AI, materials, quantum, all kinds of things. So it should be fascinating conversation and a whole day today and tomorrow. So anyway, I think the grid and the innovation thing is happening at a pace that continues to amaze me. Yesterday, I was in Austin attending the Gulf Coast Power Association annual conference, spring conference. And I got to bump into all kinds of superstar former chairmen of the Public Utility Commission, Pat Wood, Paul Hudson, many other people, all the heads of all the utilities, CEO of PEC, and many others were there. And, the energy sector continues to grow like crazy. They all seem to be, Johnny, very calm about where things are heading, how things are looking. And I don't think that anybody is concerned about the grid not delivering or not having enough energy, anything like that. It's a classic. Everything is fine. We're gonna be fine. So anyway, so before we get going here, Johnny, I don't know if you are gonna do a little a cappella singing, but if you are, go ahead.
I see trees of green and red roses too, and I see them bloom for me and for you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. That's not capella.
That's a good start.
Woo! All right, look at that. So Johnny, I don't know why didn't you go on singing or playing guitar for money or anything like that. But anyway, your Kina says he will go broke.
I go broke. That's right. I was starved to death.
Oh, it's true.
Well, I'm sitting here like you, going from meetings to meetings in Austin, Texas. I'm in my car today, but I never missed this the best RoundTable podcast. We've been really, really busy here in Texas. As you know, we're looking at the different kinds of highways for driverless people. As you know, we are preparing the corridor as so many people move to Texas, and the infrastructure has to be right, not only in terms of the highways, people talk about the traffic, but the movement of information, how information moves. So you've got data centers going in, but the most important thing I think would be the radical change in the highway system in Texas with people as cars, are having their own kind of highway. But the big news, of course, is the federal government shut down, and in my long history here in America, I guess the longest has been maybe 8 days or 9 days. I think the federal employees were paid yesterday. But also, I think it's interesting. It's always very, very political, and I think maybe the president is trying to say we're gonna reduce the forces, as people worry about the shutdown and worry if they're gonna be rehired. So I think that's going on. But like you in Milwaukee, for the slowly rebuilding of our industrial sector, and we know it is going to be different. It will not be like the
Mhm.
industrial sector that we had before. But we
Right.
know that people are working on it, like Keenan Grinnell in Milwaukee, and I'm happy you could be there. And I think that's going on all over America. I don't think anybody has rolled up all the efforts that's going on. I know great stuff is happening in Michigan, in Detroit. I think great stuff is happening with medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. All of the great Rust Belt cities, if you will, that were decimated during the last 40 years. They must come back, and we will, of course, we'll bring them back. The other thing is that there's a total innovation. But Andreas, I think the attitude, of course, everybody's not entrepreneur. Everybody does not solve problems. You know, it's kind of like if a football team loses, everybody's down on the coach. Oh, we're going to lose forever. But you have to come back. So I do think that we need more seminars on letting Americans know how America got here, that Ford Motor Company just didn't get here, Dell Computers just didn't get here. None of the great companies that have sustained jobs just popped up. But the biggest thing that we have now, as I've said before, is we have a competitor. We have a competitor in China. And I think India is looking not at us anymore, they're looking at China. And what China did was
Mhm.
to raise millions of people out of poverty, and they didn't do it with our system, right? They did it
Mhm.
with a hybrid of market economies or capitalism and the Communist Party. And I think that's new to Americans. But this is the first time that two things are happening, right? This is the first time America has a hegemony or hegemony competition in terms of who will rule the world. And I also think, Andreas, that countries like India and countries like in South America and selected countries in Africa are not looking at America anymore as modernization. And for the first time as a scholar, we always associated modernization with America, with American ingenuity, with American creativity. I think now other countries are saying we're not looking toward America now. We're going to look toward China. I think China will be a formidable, great quote competitor. And what I see is when I have discussions with my colleagues about China on the international scene, on the national scene, the idea of war always come up, right? When I look at what the Chinese are doing, it's always trade. So when we stop certain kind of trade with Chinese, they just went to other countries. And I don't know if you noticed that the African countries put a stop to the buying of American industrial agriculture products, which I've followed all my life because my father had degrees in agriculture and he loved agriculture. So, Andreas, I think a whole lot of stuff is going on. I think we are not at a crossroads, but we are certainly at a pause. And the other thing
Yeah.
is we need our entrepreneurs, right, and the business people to take America forward, like we've done in Texas. You know, in Texas, we value entrepreneurs, and the government is just there. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. Well, Johnny, there's so much going on, and I want to introduce our guest in a moment here, but Allison just secure owning 80% of TikTok. He also acquired Paramount and CBS. There is a shifting going on. I don't know if you know, maybe you do, but yesterday, Rick Perry's company Fermi is an AI infrastructure player went public. The company's valued at $15 billion, and our
Mm-hmm.
former governor Rick Perry is a co-founder of Fermi. The company's headquartered in Amarillo. I mean, there is so much going on, Johnny. It's unbelievable. Qualcomm just made a deal with ARM to create their next generation products to go head on with Apple and MediaTek on chips. I mean, it's just on and on and on. And AI is just spreading all over, impacting every segment, every element of the ecosystem. So we are lucky to have our guest today, Kedar Samant, co-founder of Fravity.ai. which develops AI agents for fraud, risk, and AML operations. And obviously, the whole thing about AI is the whole security, cybersecurity. That whole challenge is tremendous, right? So, Kedar, welcome to the show. Where are you? How are you?
Good, good. Hey, thanks, Andres, for having me over. I'm doing good. I think the introduction around, how AI is moving in every aspect, and how, even at a global scale, things are, even geopolitics is not immune to the to the impact of AI, right? So that's, you can actually see that manifest in every aspect of our life. So, yep, doing good. Excited to kind of talk more about Fravity, and have a good discussion here.
Well, good. Let me ask you this. I mean, if you look at where we are, and if you look at AI agents, and for the, I guess for the people that are listening, no longer, for example, do we have to do it ourselves. We can just send agents out. For example, electricity, you can send agents out to the substations and let them do their thing, right? So how do you see, first of all, the acceptance of the AI, which I call forced acceptance. If you look at the data, when AI was first announced, it was off the chart, and like any other technology, it dropped tremendously, right?
Right.
So I want to talk about how you see the deploying of AI agents, and the second thing I want to talk about how people will accept it. Is it a all of a sudden a spark, if you will, or is it there, and will it level off like lots of things do? Because remember, with AI, if you don't ask the right questions, you still don't get the right answers. In the old days, when I was a young man, we called it garbage in and garbage out. So how do you see those kind of things in terms of the agents and the perception of how it be utilized?
Wonderful. I think, very relevant question. Like, I can kind of give you a little bit of context of Gravity and in the space that we operate, and then kind of tie it to how that is looked at in terms of adoption, in terms of trust, and so on. So, what we offer is AI agents, which are very verticalized for investigation and operations teams. So if you look at within the financial world, if you look at fraud risk, AML, compliance, like these are areas which have to do with an adversarial setup. These are high domain expertise setup. These are ones that involves a lot of complex data, making judgment calls, and so on, right? So once you start unpacking the onion, you'll realize that these are very, as I said, like very expert centric areas. Now, within that, the question is, if you're using AI agents, what are you really solving in these expert, areas? And if you may, the best thing to kind of break it down would be, we are essentially scaling expertise today, right, with AI agents. So now, if you by definition, if you say we are scaling expertise, which is individuals who are doing these investigations, doing these compliance reviews, looking at alerts, and making these calls, their expertise have to be scaled with AI agents. AI agents are not just going to go and start doing things by themselves. You need that initial part to say that, okay, what am I achieving in this process is I'm scaling these expertise. Now, once you have defined that problem, that, okay, I'm going to scale these expertise in these workflows, then you now come to the next step, as you correctly said, is how is the adoption of these agents in doing these complex tasks. And then you can kind of start breaking it down with levels, right? Am I using AI agents to do very simplified repetitive tasks? For example, um, in our world, in fraud risk, AML, compliance, there is an alert that comes in. I look at basic checks, I do the triage, and for doing these triage, I'm doing these 4 or 5 steps, very repetitive, very operationally structured, and now I want AI agents to do those tasks. Now, that's a very, I would say, low bar, in the sense you're operationalizing tasks that are structured, and you just want AI agents to do those as is, without doing a lot of complicated intuitions and interpretation, right? Now, that level one, that's a fairly easy task to adopt by individuals in that space, right? I'm, there is less about judgment call. There are more around. It's more around repeating the task. You can put measures in place. You can put metrics in place. You can put accuracy checks in place, and so on. Now that's an easy problem. Now you kind of go to the next level of maturity, right? Now you're actually dealing with complexities that involve judgment calls, like take a fraud example or take a compliance. Like, is this really money laundering? Right, so now that's not a simple question. If these three things are met, it's a money law. It's a much more complex task of evaluating that. Now you're talking about building knowledge workers, knowledge AI workers, which are, man, the bar is very different for that. You're talking about complexities, you're talking about hallucination, you're talking about every case is unique, and so on, right? Now that's adoption there is a very different ball game, right? And then now you kind of think of the parallels that you have when you're driving a car, right? Like driverless car, which is just kind of keeping the speed, the cruise control and the distance, very, first level of adoption. Driverless cars that are changing lanes, the bar is higher, second level of adoption. And now if you're saying like full automated driverless car, bar is even higher, right? So I don't know if I if I got your question, but what we see is at every level of automation or every level of AI agents doing those tasks, the criteria for what would it take for it to be adopted and trusted by humans is going to change.
Yeah, you absolutely did. I asked you a question because I had discussions with management professors about what we call management science, and how management interacts with AI. And the questions related to things which you just alluded to, and that is the repetitive stuff. It's all AI, right? I mean, there's no
Mhm.
problem. You just answering phones and those kind of things. But when it comes to strategy, when it comes to decision making, even when I do my mathematical formulas, the complexity of the problem cannot be captured by the mathematical formulas. That's why we call it complexity theory. This is why we say that going to the moon is a complex kind of operation. This is why we say that anything that are involved in is very, very complex. Because now what we've done in finance, we have forced the mathematics on human behavior, which means that we will always have financial issues because humans will change their mind. But answering a telephone will not change his mind. So how would you suggest, just sort of off the top of your head, if you will, for a consulting firm who's interacting with the company that's going AI to come in and bridge the relationship between strategic thinking, and I happen to think the biggest one is going to be leadership. So how would you suggest in talking about that kind of situation, a combination of strategy and AI, leadership and strategy?
Got it, got it. I mean, for the way I look at it is tying it back to your business goals, right? Like, there's
Yeah,
always a purpose on, that purpose has to be very, very clear. Like, why are we doing that? And there was a recent article as well, right? Like, in some 95% of all AI pilots or AI projects that are initiated, they often fail, and there's a lot of underlying reasons that they unpacked. Among them, things like not quite prepared. The preparedness was on the lower end. Mapping it to your actual workflow to see what is on the ground and what are you bringing in as a technology, those gaps. And then finally, as I said, like the what is your end goal, what are you trying to achieve, right? If that is well articulated, then it becomes far easier to get that, like, from the strategic level all the way down to the operational level, right? So you can kind of look at that
yeah.
spectrum.
And
So yeah, go on.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So for example, what we see is, right, when you deploy a particular setup, right, a small thing, right, time to value, right? In the past, if you could appreciate, projects, typical deployment for a fraud risk AML compliance setup back in the day used to take like quarters, sometimes years, to actually deploy it in large enterprise scale, right? One of the things AI kind of promises, and in a big way, it is being realized, is time to value. Can I see the value of the investment fairly quickly? What does it mean? Now, if I'm doing that as a pilot, can I see the value within 2 weeks? right? And then kind of say that, okay, now I'm going to see the value at a much bigger scale, and either I scale more horizontally or I scale vertically. Either which way, you start with seeing the value at a small scale and then growing. Now, tying it back to your strategic question, for us, in our space of fraud risk, AML compliance, and applying AI agents to achieve some of the goals, we look at two main business goals, right? One is the monetary impact of fraud losses, compliance, and so on, right? So you're looking at accuracy, you're looking at how quickly can you catch something, and so on. And second is scale. So scale relates to efficiency, scale relates to your operational cost, and so on. The time of a particular case in the bin. Now, if you are optimizing for these two very clear metric, right, operational efficiency or efficiency in general, and accuracy, now those are set. Now let's bring it down to saying that how are AI agents solving those problems. So we have a very clear goal to say our operational efficiency with AI agents, you're going to see a 2x 3x improvement. Now then we unpack and say this is how we'll make one task faster, we'll make that task better, and so on, right? And scale across by putting an army of AI agents. And same thing goes with accuracy. Is how would you improve the accuracy? Is like this is the baseline. We are going to catch novels, fraud patterns that humans in the past couldn't catch because of time bound, because of compute bound. Now AI agents are able to dig way deeper and catch those fraud activities. Now you're kind of feeling, you're kind of setting the stage to say, okay, very clear metric, very clear business requirement, faster time to value. Now once you start kind of putting those in place, tying it back to the strategic initiative, saying that, okay, these are solving my problems in the way I wanted to solve, that kind of becomes very clear.
And I think the reason why I want to talk to you about this is that remember that business school started as accounting only. And then we have a great business school in Texas, but we brought in MIS, but that's just computer science. Okay. We brought in management, and that's just psychology, sociology, and economics combined for the day. Schools
Then we
themselves were renegotiated. So how do you bring in AI to a business school? Remember that we have something called engineering's route to business. Okay. Remember, and one of the things we have in America now is people used to major in engineering, biology, chemistry, and then all of a sudden they switch. Everybody want to be a business major. Well, if you look at, we bring stuff in from what I call the core disciplines. We bring stuff in from computer science, which becomes MIS, right? In at McCombs, we have a social science department in the business school, right? So how would you tell me to revamp the MBA program, which I think this has made obsolete, has made the MBA program obsolete? How would you revamp the MBA programs, add to it, and how would you bring AI into business schools? What would the course look like?
That's a very
Ah,
interesting.
add something else. Add
Very.
something. Remember that Microsoft is a computer science company. Didn't come from business schools. Okay. Also remember that the science of flight, right, comes out of aeronautical engineering, right? Not business school, right? Remember that all the things, all the great enterprises that we have, okay, they come out of the basic sciences. And then we transfer them and we say, how can we have technology transfer to make a business? So the thing about engineering, they just want to do engineering. They want to win a Nobel Prize. They're not interested in doing a business. So we go over and rob them of all of their great technologies and create business out of it, right? So how would you bring that new technology into a business school, which is a very practical school? So I taught in both McCombs and I taught in LibRoss, right? When I taught in McCombs, I said, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you'll be a billionaire, right? When I taught in LibRoss, I said, well, let's discuss this. Let's see what the ancient Assyrians did. Let's see what the ancient Babylonians did. Let's see what the ancient Indians did. And it's more of a, that kind of discussion. But I want to know from you, if I gave you a contract for $10 million, tell me the kind of course you would bring into my business school.
Yes, I mean, I can take a. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I'm ready.
I can take a crack at it. I mean, I can draw some parallels around how what we see, and so I come from an engineering background myself. So
Yeah.
I'm a double E major, and then I did my MIS. So there is a there's a engineer in me for sure, which is a dominant person inside, and then there is the MIS side of things on how do we use some of these technologies and apply it in the business to create value. Right, at the end of the day, we are all here to create value in some form or
Right.
the other. So for in our world, in my world of creating value, is applying AI agents, applying these technologies to solve business problems. And some of the things I can give slight off track, but I'll give you one example, right? So one of the problems that we solve for our users, for our customers, is business process fraud in on the business side. So when you're onboarding a business, whether you're underwriting a loan, or if you're giving a car to a business and so on, so as part of a due diligence, you want to see that whether this business is fraudulent and so on and so forth. So in one case example, we were looking at invoice fraud, right, when money is moving from one business to another business and so on. The relevancy for the story is in invoice fraud, you have to do a lot of checks and balances, right? And I, as an engineer, would never know what it takes to approve an invoice. It's like I have sent invoices to people, I have gotten invoices from people, but the actual on a large organization, when you're dealing with an entire invoice flow, where you have a business, you have a contract, then you have payables. Is it a duplicate invoice? Is it So once you start kind of thinking about the policy, it's an extremely gnarly policy, an extremely complex flow, and very unique to that organization. Of course, there are practices, you can say 70-80% is kind of standard practices, and then there is uniqueness to it. But where I was getting at is I realized the importance of that domain side of things, right? What is that? We can always bring in the technology to say, okay, as part of my agents are going to scan the invoice, they're going to interpret the invoice, understand what it is, look at the contract, go here, do this, and so on. So you're putting all of this intuitions and operationalizing them to say, this invoice is a duplicate invoice, if you were already charged, and so on, it's a fraudulent one, and so on. Now, if you apply the same notion, is like, what are we seeing in the horizon, right? A lot of these scaling expertise as part of AI, where AI is, I wouldn't say replacing, but helping augment experts. The application of those expertise is in specific domains. So as part of your MBA, tying it back together is even highlighting the fact that within the MBA, understanding the domain, understanding the process, understanding the workflow, and then thinking of AI as a tool that can really solve some of these challenges, right? So I would still put that aspect strong in that MBA program, is tying with AI as a tool and knowing exactly what AI is capable of doing, right? From basic task automation to thinking to reasoning, and that iteration is only going to go faster and faster, right? AI agents that were able to do something a year ago, and you look at what they are able to achieve today, what we are doing, from end to end understanding, domain knowledge, policy, putting it all together, really, really amazed to what level of detail they can go. So now the question still is, what do you want AI agents to achieve? How do you structure your business processes? How do you structure your overall domain? That still has to come through the MBA program to know, okay, how can I better use that in these businesses?
Perfect answer. I have one more question before Andres jump on you. Now, I happen to think that if I look at the business world, when my MBA students take over, things change. So let's take a company like Boeing. And there's a great book that says, China is run by engineering and America is run by lawyers. Let's look at the implications for that. So one of the great companies in America was Boeing, and it was run by engineering. When my MBA students took over, they only looked at the bottom line. They didn't care if the door worked or not. But the engineer CEO would say, hey, let's stop and make sure that the door works, right? Or we look at Southwest Airlines. Herb Keller was one of my dear friends. When my students took it over, I say my students broadly, right? Private equity, they're not interested in the customer side. They're just looking at the bottom line. All right. So how do we make sure that what the engineers do, right, in engineering school and computer science school, right, that when the MBAs quote take over it, then they pay attention to the engineering processes. Because I think one of the things that happens is that in any kind of situation, the engineers always ask, is it working? Were the doors closed? Are the doors flush? Right? Are the algorithms working? But my MBA students have no notion of that. They go right to the bottom line. Am I right or am I wrong?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I, I can share a story if I may. You know, when you were saying that, that's spot on, right? So, I did a stint at Google back in the day,
Yeah,
and this was in 2007, 10 to 14. Um, Google again, very engineering centric company. The spirit was to build. And there is a lot of excitement, or there was a lot of excitement around building cool stuff, right? So if you look at a engineering metric, it would be, um, we just launched a map reduce that would do 20 billion transactions and in matter of 10 minutes and this and that, right? Like very very. And then it's like, okay, that's cool, but how does it move the needle for our users, or how does it move the needle on the money side, right? And that gap is always there in any organization when it comes to engineer the sole goal of building is building itself, right? Like that's and when
right.
MBA is kind of, so I mean, coming to that now is, I'll give you one simple example. One of a big challenge in AI and AI agents in the horizon is cost, right? And there is always, as you said, there are flows of adoption, right? There is the excitement, there is the honeymoon period, people are more forgiving about using a technology. Then there is a realization that, oh my god, this is not solving anything. Then it goes, there's a life cycle of how any technology gets adopted. um, but one of them is cost, and now people are very very sensitive to what are the costs involved. Is there an ROI when it comes to cost? An engineer by itself is not going to think of, okay, is it if I'm doing one evaluation by an agent or one investigation by agent, it's going to cost X dollars by a human, it's going to cost y cents from an agent. What is the multiplier there? And now how can we reduce that cost? And is there a math which says I can reduce the cost by 2x and my accuracy only drops by 1%, right? Now that's a trade-off I'll take because I'm getting a huge benefit on the cost side, right? Or it does. Now those are, again, coming back to your MBA analogy, those are the things we have to bridge the gap, is applying this technology to solve business problems, having this notion that, oh, am I covered for cost? Am I covered for accuracy? Is there an optimization? How do I launch that as a business? Right? All of these, I don't know if I answered the question, but
That's
I
a
see
great.
that as a
That is that
360.
that a great. Now I want to talk to you about a great company when we finish, but I'm gonna give it to Andreas. My distinguished colleague from the White House Chronicles is not here, so I just took some of his time. So I'm gonna give you back to Andreas now. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Andreas.
I think you're on mute, so it'll take time for him to switch the mute.
He's an engineer. If he was a business person, he would have it on ready to make money right away. Well, I have a great while you're there. I have a great company that's a compliance company that's all based. It predates all of this stuff, and I want you to
Right.
take a look at them. They are from Houston,
All
and they
right.
have done
Sorry, I'm
absolutely.
back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm back.
Yeah, yeah. You
Something
need to
happened.
wake up, man. I was
Something
just
happened
telling
to
you.
my screen. No, something happened to my screen. It was
Well,
locked up.
my explanation was that you were an engineer, and I'm trying to teach you how
Uh,
to be a business person, and a business
totally.
person will never leave the screen. So both of you guys
Totally.
are engineers. Okay, go ahead,
Yeah.
Andreas.
Well, I've been listening to this conversation in carefully and in great detail. And tell me, I'm curious about a few things. So, walk me through a project. So, say I'm Citibank or I'm Wells Fargo, and I hire you. And I'm hiring you. I already have all these processes with fraud detection. Humans do it. We have, phone calls, the customers call, log the account, this and that. How do you go about injecting your technology into that already exists? What does it look like? What is the process? Walk us through that high level. I mean, how hard is it, or how long does it take, or do you need to create the agents specifically for them and train them? How long do you train them? How do you then go about instituting your new process that replaces the old process? Do you do it by zip code, by customer type, by account type? How does that work?
Very all very great questions, right? So what was mentioning before, right? Like our offering is helping investigations and operations teams, so that's a very broad stroke there.
Mm-hmm.
But zooming in into, let's say, Citibank, right, or any of the big financial
Mm-hmm.
institutions, um, this function, like fraud prevention, risk management, AML compliance, often goes in two or three different departments, so to speak. But it involves very similar structure, right? There is transactions, there are accounts that are created, there are businesses that are onboarded, there are loans that are given. Any of that, as they are flowing, there are exceptions that might happen. If it's an exception which is based on your uh, checks and balances, like, is the fraud happening, is a person legit, and so on and so forth. Or it could be regulatory based checks, which is, have you done the KYC, have you looked for money laundering, have you looked for sanction screening, have you looked for APEP screening, right, politically exposed
Mm-hmm.
person, right? So both fraud risk from an internal policy and business centric, and then regulatory, where you have to do certain things in that controlled business. Both of them, humans would come in to look at, our experts would come in to look at alerts or cases, make these decisions based on policies and regulations, and then move on,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is what an operations team in these organizations would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, take a simple example for AML compliance, right? Sanctions and essentially screening, where you're doing a due diligence of a consumer or a business that you're onboarding. You want to look at if the person is clean on the sanctions, and does it name match, or is this individual exposed to a sanctions? Is there any adverse media about this person? This person has gone to jail. There is a lawsuit pending
Mm-hmm.
on this person. There is a controlled asset freeze on this individual, and so on. Now, any of that happens, human would kind of come in, they would apply these checks and say, okay, does it make sense? Well, the name matches, but this is John Doe Jr. and this is John Doe the second. Is that the same person? Oh, the address doesn't match. So now they are going to look at all of these investigative steps. Much of these steps are predefined as part of what is called an SOP, a standard operating procedure, where
Mm-hmm.
organizations need to have that level of quality control to say that these are the steps you have to hit, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
there is fair amount of subjectivity in that process, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, there is a gut involved, there is an intuition involved. It's like, well, this doesn't really look right, although I followed all the process, but there's something odd that is, that's an investigative task, and they are going to go dig deeper and so on. Now, these could take, this investigation to close one case could take anywhere from matter of few tens of seconds or few minutes to all the way to few hours or even few days, right? If you're onboarding a business and you want to
Mm-hmm.
underwrite, it's not a small task. You're going to look at your financial data, you're going to look at your history, go through any lawsuit documents. That whole process might take matter of hours or
Mm-hmm.
tens or hours or days. Now, where we would come in, as you said, is can we identify your workflow? Like, you're using a set of tools, you're
Mm-hmm.
using a set of platform, and here is your workflow to run on that. Like, so for City, if you're saying, hey, I'm going to onboard a business and I want to do a due diligence check on this business, a human would be looking at 10 screens on an average. Look here, look here, look here, make this call, follow this process, and approve or disapprove or tag it in. Now, putting our agents here, what we offer is like a browser plugin. So very popular style now, where AI agents on your browser will do your task for you, right? So you would say that, okay, this is my case, investigate this case thoroughly. Agents would then spawn things on the back end. They would do an analysis like, okay, Kedar Samant, is there any low? So they'll operationalize all of your policies on top of your tools, and then give you a very deep insight saying that, okay, this is what you need to be doing, or this is my recommendation, this is what I found. And then human can quickly use their intuitions there, given all of that information with the human in the loop, so to speak, make that call. Now, most often we would see that time being shrunk from, as I said, hours to matter of tens of seconds or even minutes, you're able to break down a very complex investigation with agents doing 95% of the legwork, showing you what it is,
Can
and
you
then you
hear
just
me?
say, okay, now I agree, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So just giving that example is you just shrunk the time it took for an individual to do a case, way more accurate and way more faster. Now if
Sure.
you apply the same principle and say now scale this, right? I'm not doing one investigation. I'm doing
Mhm.
300 investigations. I'm doing 400 investigations. I want to do it over the weekend. I want to do it 24/7. Here it is, AI
Right.
agents. I created a whole army of AI agents, and they are doing all of these tasks for you. And you can say I want to set up human in the loop, like a maker checker, where
Hmm.
the maker part is done by the agents 95%, 99%, and I come in and say, okay, this makes sense. Places where it doesn't make sense, I'm going to challenge it, right? And these are what we would call as disagreements with AI agents. They happen far and
Hmm.
few, but once they happen, don't let any tragedy go waste, right? In the sense, like, if
Right.
there is a disagreement, use that to improve the agent and say, hey, AI agent, you didn't get this right, and here is why.
Right.
Immediately it will kind of, wheels are in motion, it will analyze and say, oh, this is
So
what
when
you mean. Yeah.
yeah, so when I hear you say that, it excites me about several things, right? So I'm Citibank. I'm a global bank, and I have an army of people that do this, right? But it's never enough, right? In terms of humans, right? Because the number of attacks or the number of fraud attempts are gigantic, right? So with I can actually scale almost to infinity without having to hire an army of people, right?
Abs- Absolutely, absolutely. So the way we position it's you're scaling your, as I said, right, scaling expertise.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you're not letting go people. You're not, but you have a set of experts. If they are able to do X
Yeah.
with Gravity, with AI agents, you are able to do 3x, 5x, 6x, right? So you are able to
Good.
keep your expertise, leverage that
Hmm.
expertise, but
Hmm.
scale that expertise.
Correct. So again, I'm doing way more, not just a little bit more, Johnny, but I'm doing way more with the same resources that I have. And then the resources that I have that are already expert resources, human resources, are now leveraging a set of tools, the agents, whatever you want to call them, that are learning at a pace that is not comparable to how humans learn. So now that critical thinking from the experts is leveraging. Maybe in the past we had I don't know, let's say a success rate of 80%, right? I'm just making that up. And now with I can close that gap to 95%.
Well, I
Ah,
think that's an hypothesis. Let me take it back to the old professor of statistics. So I think AI is just logistic regression, and I think it's uh, regular regression. And let us say that you have a problem and you want to solve that problem. Well, humans have solved that problem. Let's say looking at what will the finances look like in the future. Well, it's the same old equations, old regression equation, and we're trying to fit it to a straight line. And then we have a deviations from that first mean deviations from that line. And if we can get everything on that line, then we're good. So AI could also be a dumb idiot if it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
the right inputs. So my question is
Sure.
this: when you look at machine learning, let's not talk about AI. Let's talk about machine learning. So one of the greatest things that happened to me, young man, I used to do all of my regression equations by hand in graduate school at Northwestern University. All of a sudden, we had a program that come out where you could put the means and the standard deviation, and it would predict the line. So my question is this: you can go to infinity, right? You can have it to infinity, but when did you stop and the experts and say, wait a minute, do they ever look at that old regression equation and say, look, AI is making predictions now, but actuality, the sum of the, I just call it the sum of the squares from the deviation line, they're just not right. And that's kind of statistically.
Mm.
How,
Mm.
and that, I think that is where the predictions come from. Let's take it to engineering, right? So you want this door to close exactly right. AI does it, and maybe it's closing it exactly wrong in terms of the deviation. Remember this, Andreas, we lost to the Japanese because when Drucker
Mm-hmm.
went to Japan and
Mm-hmm.
put in deviations
Mm-hmm.
for engineering. So when my
Mm-hmm.
55 Chevrolet, my first car, I could buy a part and it didn't fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The deviations were there, right? But what
Right.
Japan did to the Camry and Japan did the Lexus, et cetera, is that there was no deviations in the parts, so there was no structure, right? And that was done not by AI, but by what we call just deviation. So we have
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with AI, right? AI
Mm-hmm.
is trying to make the right decisions, make sure that it's not
Mm-hmm.
garbage. But if the AI don't understand that the equations are wrong, or making sure that the deviations from the
Totally.
line
Totally.
are not fit, you're in
Totally.
trouble. So my question is, what's the safeguards against garbage in and garbage out?
Hmm.
Now, you, young
Ve-
man, I'm an old head statistic. You know, I can take all that and do it and do it in my head.
so let me answer
No,
these.
well, let me just say to my neighbor, I mean to my guest here, I understand when you're machine learning, and to me this is why AI is so powerful. We train machines to say, is it a cow or is it a dog? Is it a
Mm-hmm.
cow or is it a dog? All of a sudden, it seems it's a horse, and the AI said, well, let me figure it out myself. It has a
Mm-hmm.
tail. It has this. So perhaps it is a dog. And that's the power of AI because this thing will stop and try to figure it out itself with no humans. Am I wrong?
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I'll add, I agree with you, and let me add more kind of my spice to that statement, right? So I'll give you two stats, right? So one, in fraud risk AML compliance, our world of operations, you want to
Mm-hmm.
take a guess of all the errors that happen, right? All like fraud losses, or you missed out on
Mm-hmm.
compliance, or something went wrong and you didn't catch the money laundering. Of all the errors that happen, what proportion, like what would you attribute these errors to, right? And one stats that gets thrown out, which is slightly difficult to swallow, is 70% of those are human errors,
Mm-hmm.
right? And well, now you can kind of split the hair and say, what does human error mean? Like, if I'm not given the right data and then make that call, is that the case? Or was I sleeping over it? Or the cases when, put a wrong threshold on a model and garbage in, garbage out, and I consciously, all of the above. But human error still attributes the biggest portion of losses, right? Or at least more than half, and you can split. Now, tying this back is there is garbage in, garbage out, to whether it's AI, whether it's human, whether it's ML model. There's always going to be the notion of error. And now the question is whatever you are putting in directionally, is your error going up or error going down? Right? Are you
Right.
improving the systems? Are you getting better? And so on and so forth. That's the holy grail, right? That's all we are achieving, trying to
Mm-hmm.
achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you flip it around to say from a test point of view, and John, to your old school or classic ML regression, it boils down to, if it's a binary classifier or it's a regression, it boils down to one score, right? Like yes, no, what's the, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, like, right, the square of errors, there is, you can normalize it down to kind of one or two numbers, AUC,
Right.
or how
Right.
confusion be, and say, okay, is this right or is this wrong, right? Very well understood. We all understand that notion,
Yeah.
right? But
Binary.
when it
Binary. Yeah.
binary or class A, right? But it's a very
Mm-hmm.
mathematical. Now, if
Yep.
you apply agentics, what we do is a battery of agents to solve an entire workflow, from, let's say, a dispute comes in, handling the dispute throughout the life cycle, and closing it, or if a onboarding event comes in, handling that, closing it. What do you think would be a good measure of accuracy on a workflow? Right? Workflow is not binary, right?
No.
Right, like, I apply for a loan, I get a decline, and I apply for a loan, I get a decline. Both are the same, but my
Mm-hmm.
experience might be very different in one case, and experience in very different in the other case.
Totally.
Now,
Totally.
it's still a 0 or 1, it's a miss, but it's a whole
Mm-hmm.
different miss altogether. Now, how do we quantify that?
Mm-hmm.
That makes computing
Mm-hmm.
accuracy, it's still the garbage in, garbage out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing changed from that point of view, but the methodology
Mm-hmm.
that you need to use to say, how accurate are your agents in your workflow is no
Mm-hmm.
longer the same classical confusion matrix or AUC. You can still use those, but now you're looking at like how wide is that error, how consistent are you applying your, how accurate, how much time you took. Now you kind of start unpacking. You got the workflow right till the first three steps, you categorized it correctly, you did this correctly, you did this correctly, but the last step you screwed up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now what does
And
that
that's
mean? So,
fine. But yeah, let me give you the logic of my questions. The industry that has improved the most is the airline industry. Every time there's a disaster, everything is gone through. The airplane is found, the black box is found, and they ask one question: why did that happen? The reason why right now we have such, I mean, it is the safest way to travel. I was driving home one time from Austin to New Orleans. It was cloudy. Big trucks were flying by me. I stopped in Houston. I got on me a jet because I was scared to death to drive. You know why? Because the airline industry has been so good in saying what the hell went wrong. Now, my question to you: are we going to have the analog of that with the AI and on the
Mm-hmm.
work desk when something goes wrong? I think the model has always been the airline industry, and now we have ability with the low jet, what you call ones and twos or zeros and ones. We have the processes now to say, you know what, we can improve up them mathematically, but are we going to do it? Because in my world, to do that takes away from the bottom line. So, what do you think? Are we going to resemble the airline industry? Do we have everything to say, hey, what went wrong? Let's go back and look at all the codes and see what wrong. Why did that Tesla car think that that deer was a person? You see what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So I just want that answer. Can you deal with that answer, that question from the old professor who does stuff by hand rather?
so
What do you think
absolutely,
about
I mean the
that?
yeah, you hit the nail, right? Like what is a black box, like couple of things you hit the nail, right? One is this notion of black box, and when you say black box, I would put that in the bucket of explainability, right?
Right.
Like can you explain all the decisions that you take? Can you tell what exactly happened? Give me all the, so like a black box, but essentially it kind of keeps track of every decision, everything that you
Right.
did, a full audit trail, a proof of work, and explainable and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now you can at least, you're putting the mechanics in place so that you're set up as a evolving learning organization, right? An improving organization who catches something and at least knows where things went south, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the operation
And,
side. Then the intent side.
yeah,
Sorry.
and believe it or not, let me just add this. When we had punch cards, I had to do that myself. I would spend all day punching cards, and then I would take my ACT5, a dumb computer. I would run the punch cards through. Well, maybe a punch is out of place, and I got to go back and find it with my own eyes, right? But we're in the same kind of process, it seemed to me, with that. So I'm happy to say that the black box is there and that
Right.
people will look at the black box, which also, by the way, bring in lawsuits. So, you got to have all that built in.
Right. And part of that you control for is having that human element in the loop, is when the stakes are even higher, the stakes are even complex, and for example, our AI agents, we code it in such a way that you will get the confidence of the decision as well. It might say that I'm going to make this decision and I'm very confident versus I'm low confident. Here is why. So those are all the explainability side, but the intent side is, can I continuously fix those and make my processes better, right?
Right.
That velocity of improving your
Mm-hmm.
processes, improving your data quality, improving your decisioning accuracy, and so on. That intent should also be there, that how do you explicitly model a continuous improvement process built into your workflow, right? And that's where again AI
Mm-hmm.
agents have an advantage in their making, is you can, if there is a learning, you can push out that learning to hundreds or even thousands of AI agents overnight or within matter of
Mm-hmm.
minutes, right? try t-
Yeah.
Try putting a new training manual to your team. It's going to
Right.
take
Yes.
8 months to, even in airline industry, right? Here is a new policy. this is what you need to do. That training will take months, right? With at least with
Right.
you can do the wrong thing, but you can do the wrong thing faster with AI agents.
Right. Now,
But yeah,
I gotta ask it. I gotta ask this last question now. Having my discussion, we had a good friend of ours on the program. He's over all of the highways in Texas. He lives in Dallas, safe, and he said the following: if we can get humans out of cars, accident would drop by 99.1%. You remember that, Andres?
Yep. Yep.
So to our guests, it just shows you how great and accurate we are being in so short a time. I mean, you
Yep.
got to realize we are still at the beginning of AI. I mean,
Oh
AI
yeah.
is a baby now. I don't want to see the advanced decisions in the future, right? So, do you believe that if we can get all of the humans in the great state of Texas out of cars, we have no deaths anymore?
Probably. Probably. So I'm curious, Kedar, what's in front of you in the next 6 months? What's going on? What activities? What projects? How do you how do you how do you d- how do you do your development roadmap? Do you take a lot of cues from customers? Do you dream up the next module? What's going on?
yeah, I mean, we are customer focused, and I think that's any startup would have, you know, that customer passion, that goes without saying. But how do we put that in action? You know, that's what the key is. You know, in terms of what problems we are solving, what agents we are
Mm-hmm.
picking. And as I said, some of the in the next 6 months, the few areas which I'm very passionate about. One is that notion of, as you said, accuracy. That cannot be compromised, right? How do we set it up in such a way that you know, we opened up our build your own agents to our end users,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have the ability now to build their own agents, their own workflows within Fravity quickly, but that's only as good as the how accurate they are, right? So that's a big investment that they should feel comfortable to measure accuracy, to improve accuracy, and so on, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
right now in our roadmap, to make that really really solid. We have first version of it, but we are passionate about continuously. That's a first class problem.
Got it.
um, the second area is a variety of tasks, right? So it's not just, you know, a simple problem. It's not a complex. It's you have both the entire spectrum, right? Whether it's from simple tasks to very very complex tasks. Humans can scale really really well. A person can do a simple task really well and a complex task really well at the same time, right? They know the difference, right? AI agents, if you codify them to do simple tasks really well, they cannot do complex. Or if you codify them to do a complex task really well, they sometimes actually, believe it or not, they get worse off on simple task, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
our investment going forward is how do you make the agent be polymorphic to the extent that depending on the complexity of the task and the workflow,
Mm-hmm.
you get a faster, accurate, cheaper AI
Right.
agent
Right.
versus a. So there is a lot of engineering investment going on to make things faster and cheaper while keeping the
Mm-hmm.
accuracy the same, right? So
And
those are a couple of areas that we are working
yeah.
on. We are working on process automation, not process automation, process optimization, where it'll
Mm-hmm.
actually find out is like your process. This is an area where you could certainly improve. Here is why,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there are a lot of interesting areas in the
Mm-hmm.
making. So
And I would imagine, Keita, in closing here, that one area of desire by the customer would be, can you actually predict from the portfolio that I have, which are my risk accounts?
very, very nicely said. The notion of continuous monitoring, or like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, don't just do checks at points, but continuously look at my
Right.
portfolio and then say, okay,
Right.
these are my risky accounts. Something changed. Very, very good. You know, I'm glad you brought it out. That's a feature we are releasing, this notion of continuous, because all of the
because
building
because
blocks.
because because, because for example, just to chime in, right? So I may be a 30-year-old customer that has always never had a problem, never bounced a check, never whatever, right? And then all of a sudden I move to Russia, and now all of a sudden I get kidnapped or something happens, and these guys are using my account, right? And the whole notion of just tracking that I moved to Russia or whatever. I'm just making that up, whatever the country is, right? That should set up an alarm somehow. And maybe now I'm gonna watch these accounts differently because where these people are living now versus. And I think that all matters, right? All those changes matter in behavior, right?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I think I'm so glad you brought. This is one of my favorite areas, that the whole notion of continuous monitoring and how do we achieve that's, and especially with agents, it's perfectly ripe. Is like have
Right.
a Agent Smith in the Matrix, which
Mm-hmm.
is continuously looking at everyone else
Right.
in the network. So
Right.
that's what we are building out right now. So yeah, cool. Yeah,
There
yeah,
you
very
go. Well,
interesting. It was good discussion.
I appreciate having you, and we want to keep up with you and your journey. As Johnny said, this is just the beginning of an amazing transformation that should provide incredible rewards to all those involved, especially you guys. Maybe your company turns into a unicorn in the few years from now. But thank you for being with us, Johnny. Final thoughts.
I think it's fascinating. I think we have to keep in mind that AI is using what's already out there. That is, if you look at financial markets, we have never had a way to predict the emergence of a day of computers. We have no way to predict the emergence of all the great technology, Apple computers, and we just need the system open. We can't.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be, once we open it from a Newtonian system from a closed system to a Newtonian universe, anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the time, AI, I don't call it the fast idiot, but it's very, very fast, but it's using everything that humans put out there, that humans have put out there. And just, I guess,
Yeah.
to come up with a system that could predict from the human equations, because remember, we're still talking about human behavior.
Yeah.
Where the hell did the damn computers come from? Where did Apple come from? What in the video? Where did it come from? Well, we had no way of predicting that, except building the chauffeur to say that you better have enough money when it comes to buy into it. So it's been a great guest, and I would love for him. I have your email address. I want to introduce you to a great company that I think can benefit you. Yes.
Look forward to
Thank you,
look forward.
Okay.
Kedar. Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
being with us.
Take care. All righty.
Yeah.
Y'all be good now.
Johnny, a cappella. Come on.
Oh, you want me to do some acapella? Okay, I'll do some acapella. The only thing in life worth living are guitars that sound well and good-looking women. And I don't need my name in the marquee lights, so let's go to Lukenbach, Texas, with Willie and Waylon and the boys.
There you
That's a
go.
little acapella. There we go. I got my lovely wife sitting by here. That's why I'm singing
Thank
that
you,
song.
guys.
Thank
Okay,
you.
take care.
All,
Bye-bye.
all the
Bye.
best. All the best.
All the best, everybody. Be careful. All righty. Bye-bye.